Good day, everyone. Today, I'll be discussing one of the most important aspects of language teaching, the principles and procedures of materials development. As teachers, we know that our learning materials, such as course books, visuals, and activities, greatly influence how students learn, think, and engage with the language. In this report, I will focus on 7 key readings that help us understand how effective materials are developed. First, we will talk about Brian Tomlinson's Developing Principle Frameworks for Materials Development, which reminds us that teaching materials should be guided by sound principles and grounded in real learning processes. Second is the instructional design of a course book by Duria Aziz Singaporewala, which explains that course books are not just teaching tools, they also reflect cultural and ideological meanings. Third is Brian Tomlinson's Humanizing the Course Book, which encourages us to design materials that value learners as emotional and creative individuals, not just language users. Fourth is The Visual Elements in EFL Course Books by David Hill, which highlights the importance of meaningful visuals that engage both the heart and the mind. Fifth is Alan Malay's Creative Approaches to Writing Materials, which emphasizes creativity in writing materials, urging teachers and writers to design lessons that are imaginative, open ended, and personally engaging. Sixth is Developing Digital Language Learning Materials by Tom Kiddle, which brings us to the digital age, focusing on how technology and pedagogy can work together to create interactive, learner centered materials. And finally, is Demystifying Blended Learning by Freda Mission, which explains blended learning as a thoughtful combination of face to face and online approaches that gives learners flexibility and autonomy. The study of principles and procedures of materials development plays a vital role in understanding how instructional resources are designed, evaluated, and implemented in English language teaching. Effective materials are not simply collections of activities or texts. They are the result of informed decisions grounded in language learning theories, pedagogical principles, and learning needs. This report examines key perspectives that illustrate how materials can be made more purposeful, humanized, creative, and adaptive to modern contexts. It highlights how principled frameworks guide the design process, how visuals and technology enhance learning engagement, and how creativity and blended approaches promote meaningful communication. So, through these discussions, we'll see that developing materials is not just about creating lessons, it's about creating learning experiences that are human, purposeful, and transformative. Now, let us delve into our discussion with the first reading entitled Developing Principled Frameworks for Materials Development by Brian Tomlinson. Tomlinson critiques how most ELT material writers rely too heavily on intuition and creativity rather than theory and principles. He argues that materials should be grounded in principled, flexible, and coherent frameworks rather than ad hoc practices. Drawing from SLA research, he emphasizes that effective materials must promote meaningful exposure, effective and cognitive engagement, and contextualized communication. So Tomlinson believes English language materials should be based on clear theories and research about how people learn, not just on the writer's creativity or intuition. So many ELT materials are created based on guesswork or intuition, not on research based principles. According to him, materials should follow a clear, flexible, and research informed framework to ensure consistency and effectiveness. Tomlinson introduces two major frameworks. First is the text driven approach. Learning begins with engaging texts that stimulate emotion and thought. The process includes text collection and selection based on emotional and cognitive impact, experiential and readiness activities to connect learners personally with the text, response and development activities for reflection and creative output, input response and awareness tasks for discovering language features, and flexible sequencing based on learner needs. So, this approach believes that learning starts with interesting and emotionally engaging texts such as stories, articles, videos, etc. So, the goal of this approach is to make learning personal, emotional, and reflective, not just focused on grammar. Second is the task based framework, focuses on communication and real life outcomes. Learners perform tasks such as problem solving and decision making to acquire language naturally. These seven stages include readiness, experience, task performance, discovery, and reflection. So, this approach believes that learning happens through doing real life tasks that require communication. So, the goal of this approach is to help learners acquire language naturally while achieving meaningful outcomes. Tomlinson concludes that principled frameworks ensure coherence and learner centeredness. Course books must begin with how people learn and evolve from authentic engagement, not market demands. So he stresses that effective materials are learner centered, principled, and coherent, and authentic and engaging. So he also believes or stresses that course books should grow from authentic learning experiences, not just market needs or publisher preferences. The second reading is the instructional design of a course book is as it is because of what it has to do by Duria as a Singapore Walla. Walla applies systemic functional linguistics to analyze how a coursebook structure reflects cultural, pedagogical, and ideological contexts. A coursebook is viewed as a semiotic system, a text that conveys meaning through its structure, visuals, and tasks. It performs multiple functions shaped by its stakeholders, such as the publishers, ministries, teachers, and learners. So, in this, Walla explains that a course book's design is not accidental. It looks and functions the way it does because it must serve certain educational, cultural, and institutional purposes. So Walla believes that a course book is more than just a learning tool. It is a system of meaning that reflects values, teaching styles, and cultural expressions. Using Holiday's three meta functions, Walla shows how course books construct meaning. First is through ideational metafunction, represents content such as topics, grammar, and themes chosen to fulfill curriculum goals. So in here, it focuses on what is taught, like the topics, grammar, and themes. And this shows how course books support curriculum goals and national education priorities. Second is the interpersonal metafunction, reflects relationships and authority, how learners and teachers are positioned, directive versus participatory tone. So in here, it reflects how teachers and students interact. It reveals classroom power dynamics and communication styles. Third is the textual metafunction. It ensures coherence through task, sequencing, layout, and multimodal design. So in here, it ensures that the material flows logically and is easy to follow. Walla identifies a typical schematic structure of ELT course books. That is first the title, followed by the introduction, followed by the learning tasks, then finally the closing. So variations reflect ideological positions. The study concludes that course books mirror cultural ideologies and educational systems. They are as they are because of what they have to do to meet policy goals, represent values, and manage classroom realities. So, course books are as they are because of what they have to do. They must fulfill curriculum and policy goals, reflect cultural and ideological values, and of course, work effectively in real classroom settings. Third reading is entitled Humanizing the Course Book by Brian Tomlinson. Tomlinson advocates for course books that respect learners as human beings, not just linguistic processors. Many existing books are overly mechanical, focusing on grammar and drills, while neglecting emotion, creativity, and self expression. A humanistic course book helps learners connect lessons to their experiences, values, and emotions. So, Tomlinson believes that course books should treat learners as whole human beings with feelings, creativity, and individuality, not just as people who memorize grammar and vocabulary. He shares experiences where replacing or modifying course books led to more engaged and confident learners. Examples include first is the total replacement, using authentic materials like literature, comics, or student generated stories. So, in here, in total replacement, replace the course book with authentic and creative materials such as short stories or literature, comics and films, and some learner centered texts and experiences. So, this makes learning more meaningful and motivating. Second is the partial replacement, adding personalized activities, example, learner selected texts, creative writing, role play, and problem solving. So in partial replacement, it keeps the course book but add human elements like personal reflection or sharing opinions, creative writing and storytelling, role plays, simulations, and problem solving tasks. So these help learners relate lessons to their own lives. Humanizing involves designing materials that promote effective learning, self esteem, and multidimensional engagement that is physical, emotional, and intellectual. So teachers can adapt course books by adding reflective tasks, storytelling, or experiential projects. Ultimately, humanization means aligning learning with personal meaning, creativity, and joy. So a humanized course book promotes joy, creativity, and real communication. So it connects language learning to real life, values, and feelings. Learning becomes more effective when students are emotionally involved and can express themselves freely. The fourth reading is The Visual Elements and EFL Course Books by David A. Hill. Hill highlights the often overlooked role of visuals in ELT materials. Many course books use pictures merely as decoration rather than as learning tools. He argues for a purposeful and communicative use of visuals, where images help learners think, feel, and respond, turning passive observation into active interpretation. So in this one, Hale emphasizes that pictures and visuals in English course books should not just decorate pages. They should be used as active tools for learning and communication. He argues that visuals should help students think, feel, and communicate, not just look at them passively. And when used well, visuals can motivate learners, spark creativity, and also deepen their understanding. Hill distinguishes between talking about pictures and talking with pictures. So, in talking about pictures, it is describing what's seen or it is the surface level, while in talking with pictures, it is engaging emotionally and personally with the image or the deep level learning. Effective visuals should first support task objectives. It should stimulate imagination and empathy, and also it should encourage prediction, storytelling, or discussion. So, good visuals support the lesson goal, stimulate imagination, and also empathy, which help learners understand others' feelings or perspectives, and also encourage creative responses. Hill concludes that visuals, when used meaningfully, enrich communication, promote critical thinking, and make lessons more engaging. They serve as emotional and cognitive entry points into language use, especially for visual learners. So, visuals are powerful tools for both emotional and intellectual engagement. So, when used meaningfully, they can encourage communication and critical thinking. It can make lessons more memorable, and it can also help students connect language with real life experiences. Let's move on to the fifth reading entitled Creative Approaches to Writing Materials by Alan Malik. He advocates for creativity as a central principle in materials development, challenging the rigid and formulaic nature of most English language teaching course books. He argues that many materials focus too narrowly on accuracy, structure, and predictability, resulting in mechanical and uninspired learning. According to Malay, effective materials should allow space for imagination, discovery, and personal expression, enabling learners to engage emotionally and intellectually with language. So he believes that creativity should be at the heart of language teaching materials. He criticizes most course books for being too strict, repetitive, and focused only on grammar and accuracy. He also argues that materials should inspire imagination and discovery, not just drill language rules. Malay proposes several creative strategies and approaches, such as using literature, art, and music as sources of authentic emotional engagement, encouraging creative writing and storytelling, which allow learners to experiment with form and meaning, designing problem solving and divergent thinking activities that challenge students to use language in new contexts, incorporating learner generated content where students co create materials based on their interests and experiences, and allowing risk taking and unpredictability in tasks to foster a spirit of exploration. Malay concludes that creativity should be integrated throughout the material's development process, not as an afterthought, but as a guiding principle. By cultivating imagination, personalization, and discovery, materials can move beyond rote learning toward authentic communication and personal growth. So, creativity should guide every stage of materials development, not be added at the end. So, when lessons promote imagination, personalization, and discovery, learning becomes more authentic and human. In short, Mali calls for a shift from rote learning to creative exploration, where students use English as a living language for self expression and growth. On to the sixth reading entitled Developing Digital Language Learning Materials by Tom Kittle. Kittle focuses on the growing importance of digital technologies in language education and the need for principled frameworks in creating digital learning materials. He cautions against merely transferring printed materials into digital formats, stressing that digital design requires a distinct pedagogical and technological approach. So, Kittle explains that making good digital learning materials isn't just about putting printed lessons online. It needs a different design approach that combines technology, teaching, and learner needs. Simply copying printed books into digital form is not effective, and that digital materials should be learner centered, interactive, and engaging. He proposes several key principles for developing digital materials. First, user centered design. Prioritize accessibility, usability, and learner engagement. So make materials easy to use, accessible, and engaging for all learners. Next is pedagogical alignment. Ensure that technological features directly support learning goals and outcomes. So every digital feature, like quizzes, videos, or games, must have a clear learning purpose. Third is interactivity and feedback. Encourage learner autonomy through tasks that involve exploration, collaboration, and instant response. So include interactive tasks that promote exploration, problem solving, and communication. And also provide instant feedback to help learners monitor their progress. Next is multimodal integration. combine text, audio, and visuals to cater to diverse learning styles. So combine texts, audio, visuals, and animations to match different learning styles. This makes the lesson more dynamic and inclusive. And lastly is sustainability and flexibility. Create adaptable materials that remain effective as technologies evolve. So design materials that can adapt to new technologies and remain useful over time. And also ensure that they can be easily updated or reused. Kiddo concludes that digital language learning materials must integrate pedagogy, design, and technology in a balanced way. Developers must consider both instructional effectiveness and user experience, ensuring that digital tools empower learners rather than overwhelm them. When grounded in solid principles, digital materials can transform the learning process into a more dynamic, personalized, and engaging experience. So, in short, Kiddo reminds developers that good digital design begins with good teaching. Last and final reading for this presentation is from Freda Mission's Demystifying Blended Learning. Mission explores blended learning as an evolving model that integrates face to face instruction with online learning to create a more flexible, interactive, and student centered environment. She addresses misconceptions about blended learning, particularly the notion that is defined by technology, clarifying instead that its effectiveness depends on pedagogical design and coherence between online and in person components. So, in this reading, Mission explains that blended learning combines classroom teaching with online learning to create a flexible and student centered experience. It's not just about using technology, it's about good teaching design that connects both modes effectively. Her principles for effective blended learning include pedagogical integration, seamless connection between classroom and digital activities. So in here, classroom and online activities must connect smoothly and support each other. Next is learner autonomy. Encourage self-directed learning and independent exploration. So students should take responsibility for their learning and explore independently. Next is flexibility. Provide varied learning paths to accommodate individual needs and paces. So provide different learning options and also allow students to work at their own pace. Next is interactivity. Foster collaboration through discussion boards, online projects, and peer feedback. So we have to use online discussions, group projects, and peer feedback to promote communication. And lastly is teacher as facilitator. Redefine the teacher's role from content provider to designer of learning experiences. So the teacher guides and supports learning rather than simply delivering content. Mission concludes that blended learning should be viewed as a continuum of learning experiences, not a simple mixture of modes. When carefully designed, it enhances learner motivation, engagement, and achievement by combining the human element of classroom teaching with the accessibility and innovation of digital technology. So blended learning is a continuum, not just a mix of classroom and online lessons. It blends the human connection of face-to-face teaching with the innovation and access of digital technology. So, in conclusion, the works of these authors collectively emphasize that materials development is both a science and an art. It requires not only theoretical understanding and pedagogical structure, but also creativity, empathy, and innovation. From Singapore Wallace's systemic approach to Tomlinson's humanized perspective, from Hill's focus on visuals and Malay's call for creativity, to Kiddle's digital frameworks and Mission's blended learning model, each highlights a vital principle that guides us in creating more effective and meaningful learning materials. So these ideas reminds us that good materials go beyond presenting information. They inspire engagement, connect with learners' experiences, and adapt to the evolving world of education. So, as educators and materials developers, it is our role to design learning experiences that not only teach language, but also nurture understanding, confidence, and lifelong curiosity. So that would be all for this presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you have learned something from all the readings presented. Once again, thank you and have a nice day ahead.